Hello and welcome to Seattle City Makers. I'm your host, Jon Scholes. Well, welcome everybody to our latest episode. And a note here, we are recording these conversations now on video and posting them to the Downtown Seattle Association's YouTube channel. And I am pleased on this episode to welcome back a former guest of ours, Dr. Amy Barden, who is now the official chief of Seattle's 3rd Public Safety Department. She also directs the work of Seattle's 911 Center. And there's been a fair amount of news in Amy's world and in the world of the care team and care department over the last few months. She's expanded significantly citywide now after piloting the program in downtown. And we catch up with Amy on all of that and more, talk about the progress that's been made, some of the challenges that remain, who's doing this well, and get her take on the set of public safety and homeless issues we still face here on the streets in Seattle. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Seattle's Chief of the Care Department, Dr. Amy Barden. You're kind to come down here on this rainy Friday to do this with us. And you're only our second repeat guest.
I wondered about that.
Yeah.
I wondered about that. I was thinking about the first time we did this and how green I was.
Yeah, it was 2 years ago, December. I went back and looked. Episode 49. Now we're 96 or approaching 100.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Does this mean I get to come to dinner again?
You do. Yeah. You get to come to the season
the most
ending
fun
dinner. Those are fun.
Yeah.
Yes, you will be invited. And you actually are our only repeat guest with the same role. And
really?
Yeah,
okay, that is exciting.
Extra honor.
Yeah.
And a lot has changed since we last talked to you. You have a new title.
Yeah.
You have a new last name.
Yeah, I do.
You have a new agreement with the Seattle Police Department.
I do.
That was announced this week. We'll get to that. And you have your own podcast with your husband, former Assistant Police Chief Eric Barden.
Yeah. You and I tend to argue less than he and I do when we podcast. Yes.
Well, we'll get to this, but I was curious. I love the premise of it, of folks from different perspectives around a set of safety issues and addiction and homelessness. And I'm curious, sort of, as you all have gotten to know each other, now gotten married, if your perspectives are closer than they once were on these issues.
Yeah. I mean, the genesis of that podcast was I was always getting asked, what do you talk about? I mean, people are surprised that we get along. Again, 38 years in law enforcement. He absolutely sees things through that justice lens, heavy on the accountability. He's very practical. And, people associate me with an academic left, the progressives and the compassion thing. And it is interesting how often we agree because we both think that accountability is compassion, right? And so we started to realize it's interesting to us when we discuss these topics of, how and when do you intervene? One of the things we argue about the most is the role of jails. Are they even useful? Because what I'm watching is this wash, rinse, repeat of people in and out of jails. It's like 12 hours. It's not doing anything. His point is at least somebody's safe and dry. You've got a moment of opportunity there. And his contention is we should use that, actually. If you had reentry planning, if you actually intervened and then started to work with someone rather than just exiting them to the same circumstances. So it's been really fun. And, he said probably the first week, we sort of met and we were together right away. And he said, I think you could stand to be a little more like me and I could stand to be a little more like you. And the joke in my team is there was an Amy Smith and she was a sweet gal, but she is gone. I was like full Amy Barden in year 3, Chief Barden. Yeah, because it is a tough landscape. And throughout my career, I was able to lead just sort of anchoring people in the moral imperative and the ethic, and then making sure we had funding, like some reasonable theory of action and funding, and off we'd go. That is not this landscape. I mean, I have had to be tough and severe sometimes in ways. I have a gear I didn't know I had. So I guess it's Barden gear.
Do you think most people in Seattle agree on these issues as far as what the approach should be? But we're just sort of hearing from those on the extremes who want to sort of battle out through rhetoric and symbolism and whatever else.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think you and I talked about that initially, and I was already really optimistic because I felt like this is far less divisive than I thought, the things I'm talking about. Year 1, so this is early 23, I thought I might run up against, police abolition rhetoric or pressure, and still to date, none of that. I think that everybody longs for responsible reforms in law enforcement. I started to realize about a year ago, we've just conflated accountability and punishment. And that's really what we need to focus on. If you do spend time in corrections, it is not designed to be corrective. It's not. It is designed still, I don't want to say to punish, but it's like the thought is a timeout.
We're going to hold you accountable.
Yeah, sentencing guidelines, and you're going to hang out in a place. And I just feel like, why? Use that interruption to actually help people repattern their behavior, address whatever's going on. So I still love the work. I'm surprised that anybody's still curious what I have to say, because I remember when I talked to you, I was like, I think this year I'm sort of novel and interesting. And I was surprised a couple of years later, there's still a little bit of an interest. But
well, you had a lot to say this week for good reason, and a lot of coverage on a great announcement.
Yeah.
And that your team can respond to certain 911 calls without having to wait for an officer to get there first, which was sort of a long time coming and an important change to increase your effectiveness, the effectiveness of care.
Yeah.
What will it mean for how you operate? When does it really change?
Yeah.
What's it going to mean for the person calling 911 because they see somebody that might not be committing a crime, but that needs some sort of help?
Right. Yeah, we have been waiting for this moment it's been 2 years now. In fact, this is great timing. I think tomorrow is the actual 2-year anniversary of when the care responders took the first calls. That first year, it was about 1,000, 1,500 calls. I did not mind that dual dispatch design. I thought, well, this is just a conservative approach. We can really study these calls. Are the care responders safe? Are they effective? Are we getting it right? I was able to quickly mitigate that concern. What if a social worker gets shot, right? I mean, that narrative is all over the country. That has not happened. I'm always quick to say any first responder could get hurt, and so we do everything we can to prevent that and to avoid it.
AMR, medics, fire, they're responding to different calls without guns, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's funny, the unarmed responder things. I'm like,
we've done this a while.
Yeah, exactly. It's not novel at all. So I think that's just self-serving rhetoric, and fear-mongering. The reality is they've been incredibly safe. I just announced it's 6,700 calls. They had called law enforcement for any kind of support 15 times. Only 3 of those times actually was there a safety concern where they thought, oh, I might be in harm's way. Generally, it was that law enforcement needs to give this ride, or we want to call it a DCR. There was some other factor. And every couple weeks, we call fast backup for the fire department, that many times over. So it's really important that you integrate the first responders on police channels for that purpose. Because I can send care out. If something new is discovered, they can radio. They use exactly the same terminology. So that's all been very successful. The main factor is that priority 3 calls, those are generally when we see folks, the folks the mid-ambassadors are interacting with, we see someone who's not doing well on the street. In 911, that's going to be priority 3. And on average, it's still taking 2 to 3 hours for law enforcement to get out. And so the level of frustration.
So your team was waiting, couldn't go.
And if you imagine, if you're that 911 dispatcher, you can see I have a care unit a block away, and they could be there in seconds. And then that 911 dispatcher has to also sort of receive the frustration of the community. And so this is long delayed. I was, pretty patient. I was going to say for a year, but for like a month. And so I am glad that we got to this point, because the other thing Seattle needs to understand is even when SPD is fully staffed, they have never gotten to priority 3 calls in under 73 minutes on average, right?
So this isn't a new situation because of low staffing levels. It's just these are calls that really never get any attention.
Totally.
Yeah.
Ever. There's no 1,500 officers that would not get us responsive to priority 3. And I also don't think it's appropriate, right? Even if you wanted to spend the money on a department that was like 4,000 people, it's not the right first response. These are just different disciplines. And I find that the officers do know that. They understand no matter how much I cross-train, it's not the same thing as devoting my life to a clinical skill set.
Those folks don't need a commissioned officer with a gun necessarily.
No.
Even if they can get to him.
Yeah. And we have crime in the city, and we have investigations that need to be conducted. And my ideal state, I wish that officers could really spend a lot of time on prevention, really knowing the businesses again, the community members, community leaders, and then reentry. Eric has come with me to drug court graduation. I've joked that I do that to try to make him cry because it's
Is it working?
Oh, it does. It does. Let's put it on the record. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Because when you're law enforcement, I think sometimes, you're seeing the worst of somebody, right? Generally speaking, especially the types of jobs he did. He was not doing police light. He had the most brutal leadership positions coming up through the ranks. And so it's quite amazing now that we have friends over, right, who spent 20 years in and out of prison and are raising great families and leading nonprofits. And I always say anyone can change. But that is true by the science. We just have to get it right.
Yeah. I got to the 30th anniversary of drug court. I think it was a year ago because we've had dozens of folks in the program now and graduates on our ambassador team. And it is inspiring to see people reclaim their purpose after a lot of challenges and being off course for quite some time.
Yeah, I feel like that's what the whole criminal justice system should look like. I really do. It really pains me that generally it's about 100 people electing into that process because, again, it's not a process devoid of accountability. That is a brutal recovery process that people go through. There's restitution. You have to square
King
up.
County Drug Court.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a lot of work. But Judge McHale, who presides, he said something the first time we met that I always carry. He said, this is the first time in my judicial career that the system is designed to actually help and change the person. And whatever I need is fingertip ready. And so I feel like, why shouldn't everything look like that? And again, people tell me I wouldn't have elected in. I knew I was facing serious charges. I was going to be convicted.
Because they've got felonies hanging over their head.
Yeah, that's right. But again, now think about that conceptually. We're waiting until someone is so far gone, right? It's like we're going to wait until you cause serious harm, and then we're going to try to change you.
And we have a ton of leverage over you.
Yeah. It's like everything's just upside down of what it should be, really. I feel like first overdose is when we should intervene thoroughly. First misdemeanor, intervene thoroughly. And I don't mean in a punitive way. I mean in an intervention way. What is going on here?
So back to care and your team. When does it officially change on the street? If I made a 911 call today for somebody down at 3rd and Pine, what will happen? Yeah,
today is the same protocols, but once the council, they have to, bless the contract, basically. Right. I don't expect there's going to be any issue with that. And then I need to see what the date is. It could even be that it's retroactive, and I can change policy and protocol tomorrow. We actually planned the first team of 6. When we were designing that team, call types, the 911 disposition, even we've got call signs. So I'm Care 1, which I think is hilarious if I ever went out to a call. But we actually planned all the way to 96. What if we had 96 responders? Where do we think we would set up? Where are the crisis hotspots? What would the policies and protocols look like? So I've been at the ready for a minute. So,
and you started with 6 today, 24?
There's 24. There's
citywide.
3 supervisors, and then there's 2 managers, a primary manager and a training manager.
And speaking of training, what does the training look like for a care responder? Like, what are they asked to do, trained to do, expected to do when they show up?
Yeah. This has been one of the most fun parts of the job for me because when I started, most of my career I've been around licensed clinical social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, and it's just such a different type of job than a first responder is. And so I'm part of a community of practice with a few different practitioners and academics where we're always studying, okay, what actually makes a really good community responder and what does that academy look like? My theory was, I bet the letters after the name do not actually indicate success in the field because I had been on a lot of ride-alongs and I was right about that. It is a lot to do with that initial academy, which looks a lot like a fire academy and a police academy. A lot of, when you think about scene security, de-escalation, some of before the badge, what they do here, which is just getting to know your city, right? Who is here? I had no idea we have 200 languages spoken. I had no idea. And so the work of that triage, I would say the care responders have to be far more sort of culturally aware and emotionally intelligent than other first responders because they're not using a gun, right? They don't have a deterrent like that. They're trying to use motivational interviewing.
Yeah, they can't detain.
That's right.
They can't ticket.
That's right. That's exactly right. And it's so fun. I think I have this skill set a little bit myself. It's like just figuring out rapidly, okay, how do I calm this person down? And I mean, I do that just as a citizen all the time. I've seen occasions where I think, oh, this is not going to go well with the security guard. And I'll start talking with someone or tell me about your dog or, hey, let's walk. And
where you see a security guard interfacing with somebody in crisis or in need or on the streets.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's interesting 2 years in to see what inventory we needed because we really kept it open. And I've joked that the original location, I'd walk in and I was like, I guess we need baby formula. It was like a Costco. Just these mounting supplies of what the urgent need was. We knew it would be socks and water and things like that, but cigarettes are a big deal. That is one of I see that all around the country. There, right? Yeah, it really is. It really is. And just a meal. And so one of the things we talk about a lot these days are how many times do we try to outreach someone, build a relationship before we would involuntarily refer? Because we never do that. And again, care wouldn't necessarily be the team, but we could invoke it. Because there has to be, I said this in my speech this week, there has to be a space in between, that immediate coercive intervention and do nothing, walk alongside the person forever until they're deceased, especially with fentanyl, right? You and I have talked about that a lot.
And we don't have a lot of interventions in the in-between, right? Between we're going to arrest you, take you to jail for some period of time.
Yeah.
Or walk by or engage with you.
That's right.
How are the other things that have come online? The Orca Center, a post-overdose facility for when folks have overdosed on the street to go to. The Real-Time Crime Center that SPD has set up. How the Star Center, intensive set of housing units with a lot of services in the Pioneer Square neighborhood. How are these things affecting your work and the work of CARE?
Yeah, those are all important contributing steps forward. I would say the Orca Center, if I was going to give, I was going to say city, but statewide MVP, it's going to Harold Scoggins and John Ehrenfeld, and again, the people working with them in mobile integrated health. Fentanyl has been a pandemic here. It has. You've heard me say most of the crimes are relating, and I mean like priority 1 and 2, they are relating to substance use or substance trafficking. And so you've got to address that substance use and substance trafficking. And so the buprenorphine, I had heard about the long-lasting injectable a couple years ago. It's greatly improved and refined, and people who are using it now say it's miraculous, actually. I remember visiting a methadone clinic for the first time, just watching people here and thinking, gosh, this is so problematic. Like, how do you navigate life if you have to go to a place, at this time every day, there's a line out the door. Yeah. And then I also think a lot about repatterning our behavior. And I've heard a lot of folks who used to use say, I was just swapping out pills for other pills. And so when you think about that, when we're changing a habit, it's better to actually change the habit to do something different, right? So it's like if you overeat late at night, you replace that habit with a different habit. And so I do think that injectable, just on that merit alone, that it would be a quick intervention once every 30 days. That is so significant. The Orca Center, I had been at the groundbreaking, but I hadn't been back. Dr. Folkley, who's the clinical director there, she was the Harborview doctor. She basically taught me everything I knew initially about fentanyl. She knows how to communicate at like a second grade level for me, which I love. But to see her actually in this position, I mean, it just made me want to cry. It was such a significant step forward because I didn't realize somebody can self-refer in. She said, it had only been open a couple of months. She said 70 people have done that. Just walked in, walked through the door like, please help me. I do not want to die on the street. And then they do have access to emergency housing for 5 days. So we talked a lot about what more they need, how can we scale this? But they said they've got to deal with the county, access to that 30-day injectable. And so to my knowledge, that is the best, swiftest path off of this dependency and whatever it costs. When I hear people bemoan, $2,000 or $2,500, I'm like, what are you talking about? What do you think I'm going to spend tomorrow?
Yeah. What's the status quo costing?
Yeah.
And that is addressing withdrawal symptoms and...
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What people tell me is you can't, like with methadone, Suboxone, you can mix those drugs with other drugs. You can still get high. There's still this, sort of highs and lows that can be sold. And it's not the case, apparently, with the injectable. It just stabilizes you.
And I think it was this week in the International District, and maybe you posted about this on LinkedIn, where it was the fire department and...
Yeah, Harborview, DESC.
Bringing treatment, and I don't know if it was buprenorphine or something else, to the streets, to the intersection of 12th and Jackson or adjacent to it, where we know there's a lot of people using and in need.
Yeah. Coolest thing I've seen. They just did this pop-up. It's not like there was some big marketing campaign in advance, but I know the word does get out on the street in that community that's using. The care responders, I know Health One, they've had folks approach them and say, do you have that shot? Again, they're losing their friends. I think we sometimes just dehumanize this whole thing. Like, people do not want to suffer and die on the streets. They are consumed by this drug. The drug supply has been poisoned, right? And so 33 people came over, elected into services.
Voluntarily.
And they voluntarily just setting it up. And then it was interesting to see structurally the challenges, because the Health 99 team, so that's that overdose response team in the fire department, they didn't expect that. They were trying to raise awareness. They thought maybe a few people would come over. They didn't expect 33. And then it's like, okay, well, basically you need a series of shots. So it's not like, here you go, here's 30 days, right? There's a very specific sequence, and the timing is really important. And so they explained to me after the fact, it'd be like, oh no, 2 days later, we can't find the person. He was here in a van and now he's not. And so that is not hard to solve for. That's why I'm always talking about shared records management. We really do need to act as different divisions of a team, and we desperately need that emergency housing in the hands of first responders. I've started to just work around the system. You know that. I mean, I just feel like we know the nonprofits. We know where there's capacity. If we can get people reach out directly, describe someone. I go to the police and fire co-response teams, the care responders who knows them. And generally somebody does know who we're talking about. The folks who have been on certain streets, in certain areas for weeks or months, and we just go intervene. And those are my best days where it's like, oh my God, I got this call this morning. I know this person is in an appropriate nonprofit tonight.
You've used the word intervene quite a bit, and I've started to use that as well to describe what we need to do. And I can't remember who it was, but in response to what was happening in the ID of folks bringing the treatment to the folks on the street, made the analogy or metaphor to the fire department of, we bring the hoses to the fire. And for so long, we've been, waiting for the fire to come to the firehouse in how we deal with substance use disorder on the street. And so are we going to see more of this treatment on the street coming to the folks that are using and in need where they are, versus hoping they find their way to some appointment or walk through some door at some point in the future? Yeah,
I'm sure that we will, because of this early success, and because I feel like the press and media is doing a good job of covering it. And so I expect my neighbors, the citizens, to demand this. This has been a missing piece forever. We have put the onus on our most vulnerable, sometimes ill-equipped neighbors to navigate systems you and I cannot navigate.
It's so complicated.
It's ludicrous. It really is.
So many acronyms and entities and organizations and all, trying to do good work and with good intentions, but
maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of this is changeable tomorrow. I do think we've made some really, really good progress.
We've made it too complicated.
Way too complicated. And I do think in blue cities, I mean, I spend a lot of time in a lot of places and confer with a lot of governments, actually. And it's interesting how our blue cities, again, where I generally feel at home, it's like, wow, we have hyper-intellectualized everything. Yeah. We have come up with a plan to make a plan to make a plan, and we're trying to come up with some perfect theory of change. I'm like, what are you talking about? Go talk to the person. What do you know about what it is to be scared and lost, right? What do you know about what it is to change? We're not all that different. And so I made the joke in the press conference this week about how I often hear this, and it's well-intended. People will say, well, no, I asked him if he wanted help. And he said no. And my response is, he doesn't know you. Like, if I am this person and some stranger walks up and is like, hey, lady, you want some housing? I'd be like, get away from me. No, I don't know you. I don't know why we don't talk about that. And so that's, where the Nicole Alexanders, that's why I always talk about these outreach workers generally who have lived through some circumstances that are similar. They can see things I can't see.
Build some trust.
Exactly.
Some rapport.
Exactly. It's not that hard. And I think her personal placement rate is like 98%. She's just brilliant. I've seen her work, and there's almost like a clairvoyance. She can surface basically the why not pretty quick, and then take a minute to right size whatever the best resource would be. Yeah, and people are just scared. I've talked to more people where, I have 4 young adult kids, and sometimes people, they just give up. It's like, it's too much. It's been too hard for too long. I'm out. The other day I was thinking about how most of us growing up at some point, I was like, I'm running away from home. It's like, I can't do this anymore.
Tapping out.
I'm tapping out. This is, I just can't. And I have encountered that a lot. So although there is an assumption that most of these folks, the crisis population, the population we see, Amy King speaks about this better than anyone I know. Yes, generally there is a mental health or some sort of substance use going on, but I don't know that it always starts that way. I think people can find themselves vulnerable for a variety of reasons, and then we leave them there, and then this trauma gets compounded, right? I think even...
Then it's harder and harder to get them to a better place.
Yeah, even like in law enforcement, when we talk about mental health, one of the issues globally is that hypervigilance. I mean, again, Eric's been retired for, it will come up on a year in January. He's still, it doesn't matter. We can be on an island somewhere and he is still, just clocking every single movement. It's like, he doesn't even know he's doing it, I don't think, but he cannot put it down.
See one of these people that sits like facing the door in the restaurant.
Yep.
Yeah.
The funniest thing in the world is when I'm out with a bunch of cops and they're all trying to face the same position.
Does that give you comfort or just make you unnerved while you're just trying to enjoy a dinner?
Listen, I really miss my ignorance. I never understood rates of crime, how random it is. I was just walking around feeling like I can probably outrun anything, or I can probably be confident and I'll be safe.
Well, maybe he is, but maybe I'm assuming he's not armed anymore, or maybe.
Yeah, sometimes he is.
Okay.
But it's interesting because he's a jiu-jitsu black belt too, so I think
sure.
I know he's like Google Pop. But actually, that's a whole interesting tangent that I've learned about. I never knew. I would have expected people like that with that kind of, again, martial arts background or something, you'd see a higher rate of use of force. On the contrary, there's like no use of force generally because there's a different degree of confidence about how you can de-escalate someone, right? Or manage a situation without a firearm.
Yeah.
So where we see people pulling a firearm really quick, I've heard in the academy, this person has never even been in a tussle, right? So if somebody slaps him, it's like, I'm attack,
they don't feel like they have anything else to fall back on
totally.
And lean on.
Yeah, it's been really interesting.
So I know there's other cities around the country that were first at this, that were ahead of Seattle. Eugene and Denver, Albuquerque, I think, are often cited.
Yeah.
But who's doing it well? Not just who did it first.
Yeah. What's interesting when
and I'm talking about the alternative response here, obviously.
Yeah. It's such a fun movement to be a part of. When I started, the joke is me, Mariela, who started Albuquerque, Ryan Smith in Durham, we're like the grandparents right now, in the industry. It's so funny because it is so young. So, I think it was Durham went to like pen to paper first, 21, Albuquerque 22. We were 2023. And when I started, because I was from the nonprofit sector, the most common, there were about 70 pilots. The most common looked like the Cahoots model. Atlanta and then Denver had started like we did in CARE, where it was integrated first responders, sort of capitulated to political pressure and started outsourcing the calls to community-based providers. When I started, I thought, well, that might be a better design because it might be more nimble. They're already doing the work. You already have this baked in expertise. Now I'm probably the loudest voice in the country saying, do not do that. Do not do that. Those programs are closing. It's almost impossible. Cahoots, again, big gut punch for all of us when that closed because it was the first in the late 80s. But when you just have a line item in a budget, it's pretty easy to scrap that line item in a budget. My contention is that most 911 calls do have a behavioral mental health aspect, most. And it is impossible to say, oh, these are the criminals, these are the mentally ill folks, these are the homeless folks, these are the medical events. That's just not a thing. It is actually quite a small minority of calls that you could bucket like that, especially priority 1 and 2. And that's not just true in Seattle, that's everywhere, rural,
and you
urban.
know this because part of your responsibility and role is running the 911 center, which is not maybe as well known as your...
It's funny because that's 90% of my job, but it's not the thing that I'm known for.
Yeah.
The only other person who is similar in the country is Andrew Dameron, who runs Denver 911 and is also responsible to dispatch those STAR responders. I was with him last week in Denver. Shout outs to Andrew. I mean, he is one of the best leaders in the country. But we both do have this very specific lens through which we're looking at the problem. We are anchored in 911 calls and when they go well. And we both were just completely aligned that sometimes you do need medical, clinical, and law enforcement in order to respond well. My future state that I always describe is why I say diversified response, which should be lots of different things, right? Sometimes I should have a Nicole Alexander that I should just be able to send to meet the care responders on the scene. The lead contracts, the diversion contracts, finally moving into care, that is going to be a game changer, I'm convinced. Lisa Dugard and I have worked really hard on the contracts next year. My contention was it has to be citywide. It has to be uniform. It's so odd to me that it'd be like, well, no, you're in these 2 blocks, so you get this extra resource, right? Or, oh, it's 11 a.m., so lucky you get the best first response. We need just the resources we need in the city 24/7, wherever you are.
So what will that look like and mean? So drug diversion, pre-arrest drug diversion, and that option being afforded by care officers, care responders?
Yeah, care responders. So as you know, Seattle was the test kitchen for diversion, really.
Yeah, just
Lisa
up the road
Dugard
here
was
Belltown,
the pioneer. I didn't know, we just spoke recently. I didn't realize how early that process had started, right? She's in public defense and starting to have this conversation. What I knew, and I knew it in my prior career, 2010, 2011, 2012, because I was very involved in juvenile justice and different diversion strategies. Originally, it's law enforcement assisted because you basically had 2 options. You know, you can arrest this person, book them, they start to swirl around in the criminal justice system, or what if we can just divert them into case management?
Mm-hmm. And treatment, ideally,
and
right?
treatment, yeah, that's right. And there were different drugs at the time, right? Although Lisa reminded me, though, how horrible the meth felt, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were kind of joking about like, oh, those wonderful days of only meth,
right.
It was a little bit easier. But today, going, okay, in 2025, what should this look like? My contention is, no, you wouldn't rely on law enforcement to arrest for open use and divert. You would always send. Care is the diversion unit, right? You would send that diversion team first to talk to the person, then hand off to lead, because we're not supposed to be case managers. I don't think that's a good design. But first responders, that's different, right?
You're responding and trying to make a warm handoff to...
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, people seem to think that I want people to be on a call for 4 hours. No, I don't. They should be like law enforcement, fire, and medics. So handing off to lead, and then again, being able to protect who that case manager is, some information about the person in this is called CJIS, right? The FBI designation for the police department, and then also care. It's great because then you can't, you're not compelled to publicly disclose private information about people. But we know people relapse, and we know that, misdemeanor crimes don't just stop in a day, that it takes a minute, but I want to see directional improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're creating this very transparent system where we can then sit down with case managers, law enforcement, everybody, and say, okay, people are moving along. But then sometimes it's like, well, no, he's doing more crimes than ever 6 months later. And so I think people have, they've misinterpreted what the intention always was. Lisa Dugard is certainly not somebody who doesn't believe in accountability, right? PDA believes in accountability. They just know we should try diversion first before you go to that coercive criminal justice system.
So what would you say, though, to folks who say, well, if you take law enforcement out of that equation and it's care responders that are making the offer of diversion and treatment, like they have, what's the leverage? They've got no threat to hold over the person of, nope, we're going to take you in and arrest you, or you can do this.
Yeah.
It's really just go do this.
Yeah. Going back to your question about who's doing it best and not first, Albuquerque Community Safety is far and away the best program in the country right now.
This is their alternative response.
Yeah. They have their own headquarters. It's in their international district. It'd be like if I set up shop on 12th and Weller, right? Big campus. It's actually incredible to see every 6 months the progress. They're 24/7. They went 24/7 within 18 months. They, year one, responded to 16,000 calls. I went down for their 100,000 call press conference. And it was really fun because I don't think they understand they're changing the nation, right? This isn't just about New Mexico. They've been to about 120,000 calls. They've got different locations. But one of the difference makers there is Chief Medina. This is a police chief who is fully convicted that that is the right thing. This is not police body of work. It never was. It's just a completely different level of support and buy-in. And he's well liked by the officers, right? I mean, I was just with them at a conference about a month ago. And so to your question, what the ACS responders, that's the CARE equivalent, they're designed like us. They're going out over police channels, similar looking uniforms.
Mm-hmm.
And similar constraints as well. Down there also homeless response is isolated really from the rest of first response, which is challenging. But they know municipal code. They know the laws on the books. And so they're never going out and saying, hey, we're going to call the police and you're going to be arrested. But they are saying, you can't be on this median. You are very likely to encounter police later. This is not lawful. Or it is not lawful to smoke fentanyl here. We do not want you to have to be arrested. We want to avoid this. These are all the things we can offer you. So there's still that deterrent effect.
Mm-hmm. They can nudge.
Yeah, because the deterrent matters. I've asked so many people who are in recovery now, okay, what if I sent CARE? What if? And unfortunately, what I hear often is like, Amy, that wouldn't have worked. Like I was going to have to be arrested. I don't want that to be the answer, but I do hear that. People who are so deep in the throes.
Yeah.
And I know enough about the brain to understand that. It's just this obsession,
But that, if there's one thing where there isn't consensus in Seattle, it is probably that, though, right? That sometimes incarceration, the jail, arrest for folks who have substance use is the right intervention.
Yeah. I mean, it needs to be reformed, that system, right? I have seen models. I talk about the Other Side Academy in Salt Lake and in Denver. There are really superior therapeutic community, sort of prison alternative models.
So you mean reform, meaning the jail needs to look different than the jail does today as far as what it offers?
Yeah.
What holds us back there? We sort of talk about the jail as if it can never be different than how we've known it. It can't have treatment. It can't have better nursing and medical staff so people aren't having to go up to Harborview. What's the barrier to making a certain element of incarceration different than it is today, so it can be more corrective, to your point earlier, not just around accountability?
Yeah, I think some of it is just the whole philosophy, right? So jails are thought of as sort of the temporary timeout, right? It is kind of a triage function in a way. This is not where you're going to stay. Generally, it's where you're going to stay for hours, maybe days. It's been interesting to spend time in different prisons and realize you actually have better odds. There's been more investment in that system and there's better oversight in some regards. Jenny Burton is a friend of mine. She is piloting her OUT program at Olympic Corrections. And that's actually what should be everywhere, right? So this is people are electing into, it's not just education. When I arrived in this work, I thought a lot about, access to GED, preparation, access to higher education. But now I've talked to so many people who have lived through this stuff and they say, no, it's about changing your thinking. It's not about math. It's about like, how do I see my place in the world? How do I understand about what it is to be in a community? How do I learn to be honest? How do I learn to be accountable? Jenny's mantra is no victims, which was fascinating for me because I know statistically, no, you all are. If I go back in your story, invariably there is victimization, but I've also learned that is not empowering. Mm-hmm. You can acknowledge that, you can name that, you can grieve that, but post-traumatic growth is a thing. And again, the best people I know have spent time in prison, the best anywhere in my life. And it's really, I don't know how to amplify that message. I don't know how to get people close to that reality that the most honest communities we have are the people who have really been through this crucible experience. and had to become brutally honest and reconcile not just what happened to me, but what did I contribute and what do I control? So back to the question as to why, I think that there is an utter lack of leadership. I really do. I think that unions can be really problematic sometimes. We should have body cams in jails and prisons for all involved. Why haven't we done that? That is so basic. Of course, there should be an ombuds. Of course, there should be rigorous scrutiny. I mean, if we took a fraction of the scrutiny on law enforcement and put it on corrections in this country, we would start to see some real change because, I have a friend who's really significant nationally in this space, spent time in both state and federal prison. And he often teaches 98% of these people are going to be your neighbors. What kind of neighbor do you want? Yeah. Right? And that is so basic. But I think, again, to be philosophical, I don't actually think that we know people can change. I think we've still got this really kind of, Enlightenment era Judeo-Christian thing where we're like, who's the good person?
Good and evil.
Yeah, who's the bad person? How do we keep community safe from the bad people? And again, Eric and I argue about this. I just don't even believe in bad people. I believe in people doing terrible things. But I reject the notion that there's not a scientific explanation for that. There is, even when it's brain injury or something's wrong. I know there's psychopathy, right? I would never refute that, but that is such a tiny statistical portion of the population, right? So we need to just stop watching 80s movies and do something different. Did I just come up with the name of this podcast?
Well, we certainly see and feel that, in the new employee orientations we do with a population of folks who've, many of whom spent a lot of time in the prison system. And, and it's pretty remarkable to sit with somebody who says, I was just out after 20 years and here I am. And it's really stunning. I mean, there are things that I always knew, but now the depth of my conviction in this space, I just have seen too much and I know too much. And it's so funny how often I hear centering the voices of lived experience. And I feel do I curse on this podcast? I don't know. You wouldn't be the first.
I wouldn't be the last. Yeah. I'm just shut up. You're not centering anything. Everybody who has been through this is making the same recommendation and you're doing the opposite, based on some activist, tweet somewhere. It's just nonsense. Yeah. And so I quote people often, actually almost uniformly, because I haven't lived through this stuff. I'm trying to relate it sometimes to my own experiences, my experience with grief, or, there are human proxies I have, but I really don't know what it feels like. I don't know what it feels like to be the mid-ambassador. So the best I can do is show up and listen. And then at this point, again, thematically, there's so much consistency all over the country, gender, age, race, so much consistency about how and when I changed, how and when I held the win, right? What was required. And what I hear day over day over day is it was connection. It was connection to community. We know that connection is the opposite of addiction. And then connection to purpose. Yeah. And I think that's just so human, right? We all have to have a reason to get out of bed. There has to be an incentive to do the good things and a deterrent reason to not. And I will say, if I didn't last time, the mid-ambassadors, if there's one good thing going in this city, it is that. It is functionally, structurally, but they just inspire me. I'm sure they're like, who's that crazy lady that's always hugging us and thanking us?
High-fiving us. And...
I just love them because it's relentless and sometimes, thankless work and just stunning,
Well, and now with, and I was saying this to Jen on our team who leads the ambassadors, I mean, the agreement that was announced this week and the council still has to ratify it, but now that CARE is so free to go do what CARE needs to do in the downtown where we've got that ambassador presence, many more opportunities to be leveraging capabilities and boots on the ground and partnering with your folks. So
all anyone really wants is to be able to call 911, say, again, I need you to check on someone. Yeah. We're going to ask a couple questions, make sure there's no weapon, but then we should be able to send CARE 24/7 and have them there in 10 minutes. Yeah. And we are positioned to do that.
So when you, and I think I know the answer to this, but when you look out on the streets of downtown or the ID or U District or Ballard, and the suffering you see of people sleeping, using in tents, under blankets, whatever they may be. Do you see a medical crisis or a homelessness crisis?
Oh, I mean, I think of it as emotional health too. I see deep and profound sorrow generally. I think there's always a medical aspect if you stay outside long enough. There is something fundamentally traumatic about being outside and being vulnerable all the time. I've learned too much about crimes against folks who are living unsheltered, in particular women. It took me a minute to start to ask that question: are all of these women being assaulted, regardless of age or other criteria? Yeah, they are. And so if everybody knows that, how did we ever allow that to be and call it compassion and dignity? I think, when neighbors, community members say, what can we do? I often talk about, volunteering, getting engaged, but I was saying you've got to talk to people. We can tell when somebody's escalated and they might be violent, they might hurt us. More often than not, it makes sense to me. I assumed it, but I've heard from a lot of people just making eye contact. How are you doing? Are you okay? May I call someone? There was, actually, it was before I was in this job. I was living down near Overlook Park, walking by. And again, it was it was a woman who was really, you could tell, in crisis. She's getting escalated. The security guard was arguing with her, trying to get her to move along. And I kind of jumped in and started talking to her. And she's looking all over. I'm sure she was under the influence of something, but she was definitely cogent and talking. And then finally, I'm talking, and I do have like a slow, calming version of my voice that you never get to hear. I'm talking, and then suddenly she makes eye contact with me, and she's starting to listen, and her eyes filled up with tears. And those moments, I'm like, gosh, people, it's like, can we just remember that? It's like we have thrown people away. We've just thrown them out, while we argue in climate-controlled government chambers about what the ideal response is. It's unacceptable. I'm on the youth care board and came straight from a retreat at one of their locations. I did not know there's administrative offices over in the U District. Went upstairs. I didn't understand that there are 20 pristine apartments, right? Like multiple bedroom. Yeah, just sitting there. Empty, and often, obviously, youth care is designed to serve adolescents. But I think about how often we encounter somebody who's 17 and I don't know where to take you. It's 11 p.m. or I can't get you into this clinic because you can't sign consent, or, it's just that there is capacity in the system. You know that. You know more about vacancy rates than anyone. And so I feel like we need to roll up our sleeves, map the system, figure out what assets are where, and prioritize public health and safety first. I reject the notion that we don't have enough money. I just do. I did from the beginning, but now I really do. We may need to reprioritize. We may need to pause some things for a minute, but I just feel like you're not going to have thriving anything downtown until it feels safe. Until it feels like, what a pleasant evening at the theater, rather than, wow, I am profoundly sad about the state of humanity, right? Okay, I need to say something positive now. Ask me another question. I don't like ending on low notes.
I would normally at this time throw our two concluding questions to you, but we know the answers because you've been a guest before. Your first job was at the Emporium department store in Oregon. Work with your grandma, right?
Yeah, that was amazing. Yes, that's right.
And your perfect Saturday in Seattle involves art and
the Container Store,
and perhaps a run. So I'll throw this one at you, a modified.
I have to first tell you something about that. When my mom listened to the podcast, she was so mad at me that I disclosed where I hang out. She was like, what are you doing?
I think you just said under a tree. You didn't say where the tree was.
Her interpretation is an anxious mom. She felt like at 2 p.m. I will be at the Center Center. That's how she inferred it. So
it could be any container store.
It was pretty funny. Yeah, it could be. Yes, in North America. Okay, new question.
So new questions.
Yeah.
Just for you. What if you weren't doing this job? What job would you be doing?
What I really long to do, and it's adjacent to my job, but I love the nonprofit sector. I love I love philanthropy, right? I love volunteerism. I wish I could just organize all the nonprofits, everybody who's in the space, and map it and coordinate it, and then, kind of Mackenzie Scott style, just block grant. We should rise and fall together.
Like have an Uber nonprofit. Yeah.
Yes, that's what I want. I want to go home thinking about that. Yeah, because it's actually not at all impossible. It's really not. I'm sure at the last podcast, I described that Amara, Treehouse, Mockingbird Society, Youth Care, that era where there was this tight coordination, and we solicited the funders together. It was like, okay, we got a shared goal here. It's Treehouse primarily, but we want our kids in care, in foster care, to graduate at the same rate as their peers. And then all the players bought into that. Mm-hmm. And we were all working with the same funders. I was in philanthropy at the time in administration. And so we just showed up together. It was like, collectively, this is what we need. We need $100,000 next year. This is how we're going to use it. We're going to report back. And it was stunning progress. And there wasn't ever a perception of like, oh, if Treehouse gets a grant, then there's less for me. Just that mindset was not there. That solidarity exists right now in the nonprofit sector. It does. It exists in the space of reentry. It exists in the space of housing stabilization, outreach. The leaders love each other. They want to collaborate. And we've got to clean up the funding game, right? Because both in the nonprofit sector, private philanthropy, and then in government, every level, we're pitting them against one another. And there's no coordination. There's not. I talked to like a methadone clinic who was going to set up at North Aurora this week, and Suboxone and Sublocade, not just methadone. But I said, "Oh, are you coordinating with Evergreen? Are they not up there?" And she said, "Oh, I don't know. I was like, "Could you check?" Because we
one of our city's major providers of drug treatment.
Yeah, exactly. So that's still where my heart is.
Yeah,
it's
so
just
from
like cleaning
Chief
up the system.
to Seattle's nonprofit czar and convener.
Yeah, I just want to be invisible. I want to be like, I want a pen name, and I just want to quietly organize everything and then direct the dollars.
So modifying our final question, we know your perfect Saturday. Did you have a great memory moment downtown this summer? Like, what was your highlight of the summer?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Well, I've talked often because it was emotional for me. It was actually in the spring, not the summer, but the Overlook Walk ribbon cutting, that was a moment for me. It just, to me, was the greatest ever metaphor. I gave a speech about it because I suddenly remembered I left in 2015. So I had been here for the viaduct debate and the closing and the Bertha debacles and all the, I just remember all those headlines. And I remember I was like, everyone was pissed, right? It was like nothing was going to work. And everybody was short-sighted. And so to leave and then come back, and again, obviously the waterfront has only continued to develop. And I do love art, and I do love nature, and I love community. So it represents that convergence of all of it. But it's so inspiring to me that there were people who just held the vision, right? No matter what went wrong, they were going to hold the vision. And it was a vision that most of us did not grasp. I really thought that the whole debate, that it was mostly an operational structural issue about transportation. And I really didn't realize
where are we going to put all the cars?
That's how I thought of it. I didn't realize the cultural significance, and that this now is, I think, the point of greatest pride and joy in the city. Shout outs to Joy, right? Who, was one of my favorite leaders. And again, I feel like it's the beginning of a significant renaissance, and just a reminder every day that we can do hard things. We can hold the vision, take the long view, and do what's required in the short term. So, yeah.
Yeah. Amen. And yeah, it was a great day and a good reminder of what can be done against a lot of odds.
Yeah.
A tunnel machine getting stuck, a mayor who tried to stop it and take it to the ballot, and all of that, and a seawall that had to get replaced. And so there it is, done.
Yeah. I feel it was when we expanded citywide. There was a press conference, and I started telling the story because I like to journal. So I had written about it. And that was the metaphor. I had just hit that space for the first time. I'm a year into the pilot, and I've got people like, yeah, it probably doesn't work. And I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? I'm not even in your district yet. I've had 6 people 10 hours a day, and I told you there wouldn't be impact yet. And so it was just very timely for me to have that experience. And that was my metaphor, was we're digging the tunnel right now. I don't even have birth of debacles, but that is where we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I am trying to sell this vision and remind people and remind the people I work with. Again, we may never really enjoy the progress, but I fully believe my grandkids here will. I believe in that future state where it's like, no, of course you'd send the right 911 response. Of course. Well, why would you have arrested this person? This person napping, why would you have taken him to the jail? I just think it's going to sound ludicrous in 20 years. And so that's why I do appreciate these conversations, because I don't have an external affairs team, right? It's just me talking to every human I can find as fast as I can.
And speaking of that, we should, before we conclude, plug your podcast.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's called, actually, I'm going to tell you where the name came from because it's kind of funny. So it's called Bombarded. And where that comes from is my husband was and is about to be, again, a competitive equestrian. He did rein cow horse and all this cowboy stuff. Again, Google cop, the thing. But he raised his kids on a ranch out on the east side, and they all competed. So he has 2 daughters and a son. And they would roll up, to these horse shows. And that became the joke, like, oh no, we're about to be bombarded, because they were all really, really good. And so he had told me that story, and that's where the name came from. But it has been a very fun process, because the people we invite on are just basically the people who inspire us, who can provide a line of sight into the stuff that is invisible to most of us. And the greatest ever was the Amy King one. You, I think, connected us, me and Amy King. And we just talked over each other for an hour.
Eric just put his feet up. And,
actually, I think he made a joke at a certain point, like, I'm right here, So,
was he in the frame still after 10 minutes?
It became Amy Squared. Yeah, it was, it'll be the podcast spinoff. But yeah.
Well, it's great that you're doing that.
Fun.
And a lot of great content and great guests and important topics. So thank you for making time for this on this rainy Friday afternoon. And we'll see you at our season-ending dinner with the other 24 guests from 2025. So.
I am very motivated by a square meal and a good conversation. So look forward to it. Thank you.
Well, hope you enjoyed my conversation with Chief Barden. Always appreciate her coming by and for all that she does for our city and her no-nonsense commitment to great outcomes and results and improving systems and making sure we're helping people off the street and keep our neighborhoods healthy and safe, and for her collaborative, get it done approach to public service. So thank you to her for making time to come on Seattle City Makers, and do check out her and her husband, former Chief Eric Barden's podcast. They've got some great conversations and guests on these general topics. And if you found this one interesting in this conversation and set of topics interesting, no doubt you will really enjoy their podcast. I want to close out with a recommendation of something to check out in downtown Seattle. And we're full on into cozy up by the fire and grab a book season. The dark is here, the wet is here, and an announcement of Barnes & Noble returning to downtown Seattle was made this last week. Just in case you missed it, wanted to lift it up here. Don't have an opening date yet, but they'll be returning to downtown, taking about, I think it's 13,000 square feet in the former North Face location over there at 5th and Pike. Great to have them back in downtown, or soon to be back. And it was high on the list of my daughter Avery's requests for new retailers and things that she was hoping to see in downtown. And soon we'll have Barnes & Noble back. So Avery and others will be delighted, I know. Well, thanks everybody for joining us on this episode of Seattle City Makers, presented by the Downtown Seattle Association, with support from James Cito and production by Thread Theory.